Chris Paul he is the point guard. Anyone who is more prepared or better prepared than Chris Paul.
Acquired taste from a standpoint of he's a throwback point guard.
Like, he was so cerebral, man. Like,
he's one of the greatest point guards ever.
I'm going to say that. He's 36. He's about to turn 37 next month. And CP3, Chris Paul, is the best point guard on the planet.
Luck. Luck is one of those things that can be good or bad to you. Luck is important both in life and in sports. It can make or break the day sometimes. So why am I yapping about a subject like luck? Everyone knows how luck works. Well, there is one player who I'd consider unlucky. And I'm not just saying that loosely. I mean, his luck is terrible. In fact, I would call him the unluckiest player ever. Chris Paul is a person that I can't say has real flaws in his game as a point guard. He has everything you need in a point guard. Smart, efficient, and gets the team involved. If you look at every team he has went to, he has made them better. In his 19 years as an NBA player, he has made the playoffs 15 years. And obviously, he has something to do with it. However, the one thing that has eluded him the most in his whole career is that one trophy, the championship trophy. There's been many instances where he's came close to obtaining it, hairs away. But in his case, most of the time, it has been on the team or plain bad luck. The luck that has been biting at him ever since the series against the Spurs in 2015, where Chris Paul played on an injured hamstring. And as glamorous as the game winner was, that injury that was sustained might have never been healed all the way. A moment that would come to haunt him over and over again. This is the unluckiest player ever, Chris Paul. In his 2 years at Wake Forest, Chris Paul would cement himself as one of the top college basketball players, leading the team to a record-breaking 27 wins, the program's first #1 ranking, and has a top rank in the stats of career steals, three-point percentage, free throw percentage, career assists, leading the team to the NCAA tournament. And of course, unfortunately, they would lose in the Sweet 16 to St. Joseph. Despite the loss, Chris Paul had made it clear he was a skilled, smart point guard who could run your team and lead them to heights that no one else can. A skill that was recognized by the New Orleans Hornets. So when Chris Paul declared for the 2005 draft, he was drafted number 4 in a class with Danny Granger and Darren Williams. Of course, there were questions about Chris Paul as a player, being an undersized point guard at under 6 foot and an unaggressive defender and a little too competitive. Competitiveness that the New Orleans Hornets desperately needed with the record of 1864 the year previous. Could Chris Paul turn this thing around and even bring him to playoff contention? In his first season as an NBA player, Chris Paul would show that he was the real deal, leading every rookie in most stats and was nearly dubbed Rookie of the Year unanimously. In his second season, would average 17 and 8. And while the Hornets would not make the playoffs for the first 2 years, it was clear that Chris Paul had the skills and the talent to take this team further. Going further is exactly where they went in the 2007-08 season. They would go to the top of the Western Conference, finishing with 56 wins, a franchise record. For Chris Paul, he finished second in MVP voting and was named to an All-Star, All-NBA, and All-Defense in 1 year. Of course, they went above and beyond to secure a playoff berth. So how would Chris Paul do in his first year against the Dallas Mavericks? Well, in Game 1, he dropped 35 points. Then, in Game 2, dimed 17 times, unbelievably beating them in 5. The Hornets had done it. They had won a playoff series. Could they go further or not? Unfortunately, in the next round, they would lock horns with the San Antonio Spurs and were eliminated. In the next year, Chris Paul would increase his production, but well, basketball's a team game, and despite this, the team's record would see a decline, and unfortunately the Denver Nuggets would be the ones to eliminate them. The 2009-10 season would start off terribly. A slow start would see Byron Scott get canned, which would be a factor in the eventual move to the Clippers. In February of 2010, Chris Paul would get sidelined for an injury, and without Chris Paul, the team would miss the playoffs. The injuries weren't done yet, as an injury scare in March 6 would see Chris Paul getting carried off in a stretcher. Luckily, he would return 2 games later. With him finally being healthy, the team would make the playoffs, matching up with the Lakers. And while Chris Paul was outstanding in this series, the team wasn't so much, and they would get eliminated in 6 games. And it would mark the last time we would see number 3 in the New Orleans uniform. But who could blame him? He did everything he could, while the organization as a whole made some rocky decisions that just didn't benefit him in the slightest. At his limit with the organization, he was nearly traded to the Lakers to team up with Kobe, but for a sketchy reason, it was vetoed by David Stern. After a couple failed trade attempts, he was sent to the Clippers, an infamous infamous era in Chris Paul's career, the Lob City Era to be specific. An infamous era in one of the most famous teams in basketball history. Lob City was some of the most fun basketball to watch for a while. Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan with the likes of Jamal Crawford were putting on a show every single game. Of course, being helped by the point guard himself, Chris Paul. Like I've stated earlier, everywhere Chris went, he made them better. The Clippers had everything but a point guard, and Chris Paul was the right move. Within the first year, the team would make the playoffs, but would get swept in 4 games in the second round by the 2012 Spurs. The next year would be more the same, really good regular season, but swept only this time by the grit and grind Grizzlies. In this offseason of 2013, the Clippers would let go of Vinny, the coach of the Clippers, and would get former champion Doc Rivers. With this signing, the Lob City era would take a dark decline, as all sorts of off the court and on the court things were slowly derailing this talented team little by little. Chris Paul and Lob City had 2 golden opportunities to win a ring in 2013 and 2014-15, and in the 2013-14 season, they would acquire sharpshooter JJ Redick and Jared Dudley, and would break the regular season record of 56 with 1 win, matching them up with the Warriors. This was a back and forth slugfest between 2 up and coming teams, but the Clippers would come out on top. This was their chance to win the ring. All they had to do was make it past the Thunder, but in one of the weirdest turns of fate, the Thunder came back and won the series while Lob City clearly melted down on every front and would get sent home in unfortunate fashion. While each member of the team years later would give their 2 cents on why they crumbled in this series, it seems to be Doc River being the center of most of the reason on why they crashed so hard. Of course, next year is another chance. 2014-15 had one of the most competitive playoffs ever. Who would the Lob City face in the first round? The defending champions in the Spurs. No one had them beating the Spurs. Even I didn't believe it. This series was once again a dogfight, which would end in a contested Chris Paul layup. He would match up against the Harden-led Rockets. They had just beat the defending champs. The sky was the limit. The Rockets had 2 less starters as well. Everything seemed right. The stars had aligned. They can make the conference finals. Well, the stars did not align, as they would get sent home in 6, and unfortunately, this series would be the straw that broke the Clippers back, and the last 2 or 3 years would see first round exits by the Blazers in 2016 and the Jazz in 2017. During that offseason, Chris Paul, seeking a contract extension, did not get what he wanted, and to Houston it was. Houston would see a team up of Chris Paul and James Harden, and see them go toe-to-toe with KD and Steph, pushing them to 7 games. However, after an injury that was all too familiar, it would go downhill for Houston. After the loss to the Warriors, Chris Paul and James Harden just had so much beef, a beef that made their relationship unsalvageable. And after 2019, Chris Paul would go to OKC. A season that in the first time in a long time didn't have the question of obtaining the Larry O'Brien trophy for once. This is mainly because OKC comprised of young guys like Shea, Lou Dort. Chris Paul was here to just be a veteran presence, something that he really excelled in. In some ways, this could have been like a break from the earlier years of constant turmoil. OKC would make the playoffs, and their first round opponents would be the former team of Chris Paul's, the Houston Rockets. And while Chris Paul would ball out, they would go out in 7, and that was the last time we see Chris Paul in the OKC uniform, as he would go to the sunny side in Phoenix, joining Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. This year was the year that Chris Paul would finally make the final, but that's a conversation for later. Let's go back to the beginning. Chris Paul once again joined the team with the aspirations of becoming champion. This team had everything required to be a championship team. Forward, Mikal Bridges. Center, DeAndre Ayton, or as he liked to call himself, Dominate. Guard, Devin Booker. Chris Paul would be the player that could unlock Devin Booker's potential. And unlock he did, as they would win 51-21 games in the regular season, a jump up from the previous 34-39 record of the 2019-2020. This revamped Suns team had the Suns fans feeling confident as they could break the curse. They could finally win the chip, a confidence that was further reaffirmed when they beat the defending champs in 6. And against the Denver Nuggets, they would sweep them and beat the LA Clippers in 6. They just breezed through the finals. Now, they had to face Milwaukee in the finals. They would jump to a 2-0 lead. They could win this. Chris Paul would finally obtain the trophy that was avoiding him. The Suns could finally break the curse. All they had to do was win 2 more games.
After a half century, the Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions once again.
Once again, they would have to make the climb back to the finals, but what they didn't know is that a man by the name of Luka Doncic was about to give them the work in Game 7, send them home in embarrassing fashion. And while this was embarrassing, the front office would do something more embarrassing. They would get the team gutted for KD, and well, this didn't work at all. They got bounced in Game 6 of the second round, and Chris Paul was traded to the Warriors, who then waived him. While Chris Paul isn't really liked by people and by a lot of NBA fans, there is one thing you cannot deny. He's a smart player. Each team he has went to that signed him would win more. And while he may never obtain that trophy trophy that has eluded him. Unfortunate as that is, he certainly won't be forgotten, either for the funny moments or for his playmaking. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Peace.